It is finally here. Earlier today, Bethesda did drop the 2021 roadmap for Fallout 76, as well as some other announcements of some things happening with the game. In this video, I want to break down this roadmap, go over some of the community response, as well as my own, as this has been somewhat divisive. Some people extremely hyped for what's on this, and some other people kind of a little wary, like, oh, that's it? And there's some pretty big announcements being made here, including what is basically mod support, or looks like it's going to be mod support, coming to Fallout 76 in 2021. And for some of this stuff, we actually have some context from previous interviews or quotes that I will be highlighting. And although I did want to get this roadmap video out today because there's a lot to unpack on the roadmap in its own right, I should have a second or follow-up video out tomorrow, as the developers are doing a AMA on Reddit. This is going to be the project lead and design director. It's starting at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. They did one AMA in the past and it actually answered a lot of questions. They didn't try and duck every hard question. They actually answered many of them. So I'll definitely have a recap tomorrow on some of those most notable answers if you want to get subscribed to check out that video. But otherwise, looking at the roadmap itself, it is slated into 4 major content drops. This really geared around the season system we have underlining all of this for Fallout 76. So this spring is locked and loaded. And although this roadmap doesn't have any dates associated with it, just those calendar seasons, we know that Locked and Loaded is going live on April 27th, with the major features being camp slots, special loadouts, a big expansion to the daily ops overall, and even some smaller stuff like aim assist and even crafting sliders, with the season system bringing in mannequins and display cases for power armor. And frankly, basically all of this content is on the public test server right now, and I've already made a video on it. So if you want to check out the deep dive on Locked and Loaded, I'll have that video in the description and in the eye, and I'm not going to really repeat all of that information in this one because I'm sure a good chunk of you already saw it. What's more exciting is looking ahead at Steel Reign, which is the continuation of the Brotherhood of Steel storyline, being described how you'll forge the future of the Appalachian Brotherhood in the conclusion of the Brotherhood of Steel storyline, complete new quests, meet new NPCs, explore new locations, and earn powerful new rewards. And some of the powerful new rewards we may be getting with this are the ability to craft legendaries and even legendary power armor, which is likely going to be one of the key rewards here. As well as a bonus during this is going to be unlimited ranks during the season. There's an extra little blurb in the post itself where it does say, whose side will you take? Your choices will change the wasteland. So likely we'll actually have to make a choice around siding with Knight Shin or Paladin Romani. And overall with this one, I'm excited to see where this story goes, but I'm also kind of wary. This of course is part 2 to Steel Dawn, which debuted later in 2020. Steel Dawn, although being kind of interesting, was just incredibly short to the point where it was just not enough content, I think, for a standalone release. The story was just getting interesting and then just kind of ended, only actually being around 3 hours if you did it at a reasonable pace, and perhaps 4 hours if you tried to stretch it out as long as possible. This ending it as somewhat of a cliffhanger where you have to make a choice between 2 of the major characters. So now when we look ahead at Steel Reign, it does make me wonder, what is the scope of this one? Is it just going to be another 3 hours of content, or is it going to be quite a bit longer like what we had with Wastelanders? And I think this one almost has a bit more riding on it. Last year, we at least did get Wastelanders earlier in the year, then Steel Dawn was just a little extra towards the end. Looking at this roadmap overall, it looks like Steel Reign is really the only major piece of story content we're getting. So if anything, that does give me a bit more confidence that it will be a bit lengthier overall. As far as those 2 new features listed with legendary crafting and legendary power armor, not much is known about what exactly that means. They do mention in the post, this summer craft specific legendary items using legendary modules. What I'm sure many of us immediately jump to is the system implemented with Wastelanders for the weapons you bought with gold bullion. So once you unlock the plan, you could craft a legendary version of that weapon. Conversely, right now with a lot of the weapons added in via Steel Dawn, the grind was much longer. You had to do daily ops to hopefully get the plan to actually unlock that weapon, but it was random, so it might take several days to actually get the plan. And then from there, if you killed a legendary or went to the legendary purveyor, you just had a random chance at getting a legendary drop of that particular weapon. You didn't have a direct way to guarantee this weapon as legendary. So it seems like that's the most obvious answer as to what legendary crafting is, expanding this legendary crafting system to be more or most legendary weapons in the game. So like, let's say you got that cool missile launcher, well, now you can craft a legendary version on a whim. Although it also could be something different, like actually crafting specific legendary effects, which also could be pretty cool. Legendary power armor actually gets me a bit more excited. This was accidentally added to the game, or technically hacked into the game game late in 2019, so there were a couple of sets floating around, but at least at the time, the way this worked was many of those traditional armor effects were just applied to power armor. And if it does work that simply, this will be extremely powerful. Power armor to begin with has higher defensive stats, but the trade-off is you don't get the legendary effects. If it now has the best of both worlds, it'll likely make power armor a near must-use, but you have to imagine with how Bethesda has been handling the implementation of some of this new content, legendary power armor will likely have some kind of grind associated with it. I really doubt it's going to just be something you get as a reward for completing the questline. As far as Season 5 being escape from the 42nd century, as well as the seasons having unlimited ranks now, this season's theme seems to be Katie Inkwell inspired based off some of the other translations of this roadmap, so likely it'll be taking place very far in the future, kind of a time traveler theme, which is pretty cool. And the unlimited ranks for the season is likely that once you hit rank 100, you could still complete challenges and you'll just get random things. Maybe some atoms, that would definitely be the most ideal if it did award you atoms, but either it's going to be very few, or maybe it'll just be mixed in randomly with other things like lunchboxes, consumables, and some caps you can get. Right now, after hitting rank 100, there's just nothing else to do. And with some of these seasons now approaching 4 months plus in length, there certainly is a request and desire for there kind of being an unlimited cap for people that do finish it early, which at this point is the vast majority of people that were trying to finish it. One thing that was expected to be here that is nowhere on the roadmap overall is expeditions. We don't know much about these, but they were basically described as little off-map adventures that would be going on. They were actually on the 2020 roadmap as a part of the last Brotherhood of Steel expansion. And it seems like a couple of things happened with expeditions. One, just due to the natural delays between the pandemic, between the Austin freeze, where Bethesda Game Studios Austin, as you could probably guess, is based. These are the people actually developing Fallout 76 right now. In an interview late in 2020, they actually provided an update around expeditions, saying, "We are looking at expeditions to be a way to maybe do something off-map. We have a big list of locations, we're setting in on one right now." And in the same interview, the project lead likened expeditions to an expansion like Far Harbor, where you interact with a vehicle and head to an entirely separate map. And even at the time, he was describing how expeditions were subject to COVID delays. So what I'm guessing happened was expeditions not only got larger in scale, in that they were originally meant to be something a bit smaller, there's a lot of hype and interest around them, Bethesda found, hey, this is a cool idea, so kind of made it into a full-on DLC experience like Fallout 4. But then also with the pandemic, all of this led to it getting moved until 2022, or at least that's what I'm guessing here. I don't think they're outright canceled, and we'll probably have a more concrete answer coming tomorrow with the AMA, as I'm sure many people will be asking this question. But speaking of questions that we probably will have, we also do have worlds are changing in fall, including Season 6. And this is extremely vague. We know there's a Daily Ops expansion part 2 coming, similar to what's live on the PTS right now, but then stay tuned later this year for the next evolution of private worlds. And in the article later they do say, the winds of change are coming, and with it an evolution to private worlds. Stay tuned to future Inside the Vault articles for more information as we get closer to release. And I think there's a couple of ways to interpret this, but one of the clear things is it seems like this is going to be mods or some type of custom content. We heard from interviews dating back almost a year now how Bethesda had a prototype of mods being worked on internally, with arguably the most damning quote being from October 2020. The project lead says, "We talked about mods, we want to bring them, we're still going to bring them. That's a great feature in a server-based game, allowing players to modify it. We're finally getting close to being able to talk about modding in the future and give details out, but we're not there yet. But yes, we are actively working on modding, and I'm super excited for the future of the game because of modding." He says that about 5 months ago. Now we're getting this super secret update to private servers. I think it's got to be mods, right? And of course, over 1,000 days ago, we heard Todd Howard confirm that Fallout 76 was getting mods at some point. And it seems like at this point in the game's life cycle, it's one of the obvious directions to take it. Democratize the creation of content somewhat and lock up behind private worlds, which kind of in turn means that yes, you will need a Fallout first subscription to use mods to some degree. Now again, technically none of that's confirmed here. All they're saying is an expansion to private worlds, so it just could be custom worlds, like you could change some of the game settings, but I imagine some degree of custom content will be introduced at this point. And the reason I think this is even a bit more likely with how they're handling it here is that I think this is giant news. Mods coming to Fallout 76 and perhaps even getting a few mod authors into the program ahead of time, like what they did with Fallout 4 and Skyrim when they brought mods to consoles. A few months before that went live, they already had people making stuff so they could be published day one. At E3 2021, or whatever Bethesda summer event is, they will reveal this to the world because it's giant news. People are going to be excited about this, and probably a lot of people will try Fallout 76 again just for this feature. And I think saving this big announcement until then kind of makes sense if it is a bigger announcement, or at least that's the optimistic side of me. The other side could be that they just don't know the scope of this yet. Perhaps they are setting up this system for private worlds to have custom content, but they're not quite clear on how much custom content will be allowed. So although it's planned to come later this year and the framework is being established now, they don't want to overpromise here and lead to disappointment. So I definitely think one of those two things are possible, but you have to imagine this has to be custom content or modding in one way or another. Could be fairly bare bones, it could be full open like we've had with past games. It'll likely at least have some additional restrictions like only being through Bethesda.net, not through Nexus. One of the interesting quotes that could tie into this as far as what you can actually do with custom worlds or mods, whatever this ends up being, was from August of 2020. This being a question about PvPers and the future of PvP in Fallout 76 or something like a new game mode like survival. And it was described how, although the majority of the focus is on PvE, there is something that is going to be coming in the longer term, late next year, that being late this year, that could provide a lot of interesting opportunities for PvPers, but they couldn't really elaborate much on it at the time, and really how it had a lot of potential for some cool content around PvP and some more unique experiences in the game. But either way, for me, this is the most exciting thing on this list. Custom content in Fallout 76 has a huge amount of potential. So whatever direction they go with this, I think it could lead to very big things for this game or be very, very disappointing depending on the implementation. But then come winter, we do have Tales from the Stars. Stars have aligned in the Wasteland, marvel at the discovery of new legends and the reappearance of an Appalachian myth. And here we'll get things like 4-star legendaries, a seasonal event with the ritual, and even invaders from beyond, public challenge, and daily ops surprises, with the little bonus at this point being camp pets. And a bit of an extra description, face off against all new dangers with an all new out of this world event. Public challenge invaders from beyond will unite everyone across the server to complete challenges, face off against all new foes, and earn some stellar new rewards. The cultists of Appalachia are up to something sinister in a brand new seasonal event, the ritual. Help the cultists in Point Pleasant prepare an exciting and dangerous ritual, and they'll repay you with unique rewards. And then of course Season 7, but we don't know exactly how that'll fit in or what it'll actually be. So all of this actually seems super exciting to me. Unfortunately, it doesn't so much seem like a full-on alien DLC, but rather the aliens are introduced with a new event and some daily op surprises, whatever that ends up being. I wouldn't be shocked if this new event, Invaders from Beyond, where they say it'll unite the whole server, is going to be another boss tier fight. So something like the Scorchbeast Queen or Earl, likely where you'll fight aliens or perhaps an alien mothership. I don't know, there's a lot of cool ways they could handle this one. It of course seems clearly to be alien themed. In Fallout 76, there are a ton of nods to aliens, including some mysterious holotapes, a ton of little things you could find all over. I made a full video on this in the past. I recommend checking it out if you want to look at some of this content. Of course, the cornerstone of that actually being the Flatwoods monster. But even more recently, we have the mysterious Guidestones and the whole mystery as to what those are, where they came from. Could this somehow be connected, just coming a year after those Guidestones were found? Or really, in this case, a year and a half? If this does end up being another large-scale event that everyone has to fight against, I think that'll be really cool. It's one of those things that I wish they did more of. We only have two, one with the base game, one with one of the major expansions. I think just having one for every major region should be a major goal of the game, especially before they start moving out of Appalachia to other world spaces. There's really not much to say about the seasonal event with the ritual. I love that the cultists are getting more content. I think basically everyone wanted that. They're an interesting group. I think there's a lot of potential behind that. I would really love to see a full-on questline for them. 4-star legendaries, I think, have a ton of potential to add a really cool and interesting mix-up to the legendary system in this game. If you break down Fallout 76, especially for a lot of those currently active players, legendaries become a cornerstone of the game towards the end game, and even in the middle, grinding for good legendaries, repeating events for good legendary drops, or even just plans for the ability to unlock new legendaries. Adding in a 4th star, which also was hacked in the past along with 5 stars, could really shift up the meta overall. overall, or just added another interesting twist. Seems like power creep could be a real problem here, especially coupled with legendary power armor. People might be tankier than ever, and then with a 4th legendary slot actually dealing more damage than ever. One thing I hope Bethesda does at some point that is nowhere on this roadmap is actually change up the meta somewhat, or at least give us extra options. I've been saying this for like a year at this point, but I just think an amazing way with one of these updates to get players excited again about trying out new stuff is to give them more options. Like right now, if you look at the list of the primary legendary effects, for weapons alone, there are about 23, about 5 to 7 of which you actually want. The rest are largely useless, like all of the various ones that increase damage against Mirelurk super mutant schools. Nobody wants that, nobody uses those. Revisiting some of the lesser used ones and giving them different effects, or things like Nocturnals that just kind of nerf a weapon into the ground, almost making it unusable. I think if Bethesda actually gave those useful features and things that could be meta or could be viable on any build, could make the whole legendary system super exciting. And although it's nowhere explicitly stated on this roadmap, a comprehensive balance pass revisiting some of the lesser used perk cards or the avoided legendary effects could breathe a ton of new life into this game and get you excited about doing the grind again. Imagine if every legendary that dropped was somewhat usable depending on the build. And then lastly, camp pets. It seems like this may have been relegated from actual pet followers that a lot of people are hoping for to just pets that will stay around at your camp, very similar to those allies we do have at camps right now. We saw a ton of this stuff pop up on the Atomic Shop last year. It seems like it got pushed back quite a bit. Actually, in the last AMA, there was a huge amount of discussion and questions answered on pets. And it'll be cool, but again, it's not a major feature. Likely we'll have microtransactions connected to it. So overall with this one, I'm excited to see what Bethesda is doing with a lot of these. I don't hate any of the new content, like each individual thing they describe here, between Steel Rain, the private world stuff, which is hopefully mods, and then a new event, 4-star legendaries, as well as perhaps a new boss fight, all sounds really cool and exciting. You can definitely see that there's not a lot of content on this roadmap, especially compared to the past two, but also it is important to keep in mind that those past two roadmaps didn't actually happen. So one perspective of looking at this new roadmap is all of this will likely happen this year, or at least hopefully will happen this year. Seems a lot more likely than it was in the past. So if anything, perhaps they're even under-promising in some regards, especially with the Microsoft buyout. Who knows if Fallout 76 will get even more support and some extra stuff will be sprinkled in all throughout. But I definitely understand some of that frustration, as although this stuff seems exciting, it doesn't get me super excited. The mods definitely have the potential to do that, but we kind of got an announcement that there will be future announcements, like for Locked and Loaded. A lot of that content is cool and fun, but it's not something that's going to really get me playing every day again. It's a great background update that'll make future content like Steel Rain more fun to experience. Steel Rain could really deliver, but after looking at what Steel Dawn ended up being, I have some serious concerns about the length of this second part of the DLC. If it ends up being a 10-hour story experience, I'll love that, and I'll definitely sing its praises as long as it actually is good. But if it's another 3 hours, I would have rather they just delayed Steel Dawn to release both Steel Rain and Steel Dawn as one larger piece, and you could experience it all at once. One thing I do really like about the winter content is how they're looking at those alternate factions. Aliens and the cultists are two things that I think players and myself have been really wanting more of, so I like that those are coming in some form. It just seems like that overall it's going to be smaller. Not full-on quest lines looking at those factions, but rather two events that you can do, one of them being limited time. So overall with this one, I think the future of Fallout 76 is still interesting. For me, a lot of how good 2021 will be is going to be determined by that fall release with the private world update. Because when you take a look at all of the other content put together, it doesn't really seem like all that much. And this is coming after we're already on a fairly long content drought. We're getting good updates to the game, Locked and Loaded included, is going to be a solid one. But it's not that new cool stuff that gets you interested in playing again, at least not for me, and I think for a lot of other people. Now all of this could be setting up for a massive 2022. I imagine expeditions could be huge, especially if it's even remotely in the scope of Far Harbor, but wherever they take this game next could be very exciting. One of the other things that you just have to mention is that winter update being space or alien themed, and that is where a lot of people are hoping Starfield comes out at the end of 2021. I imagine Bethesda knew what they were doing with putting a Starfield in the background of the end of the 2021 roadmap. In all likelihood, it actually probably doesn't mean all that much, but yeah, those are my thoughts on the roadmap, a breakdown of what you can expect from it. And honestly, at the end of the day, even if all of this ends up being smaller scale, you get the game for $10 in Game Pass, you get it for relatively cheap even on other marketplaces, and all of these updates are totally free. There's definitely enough content to keep me interested, and even if I end up uninstalling after each of these updates and taking a few months off, I still think that's mostly okay. As always, again, I thank you all for watching. I hope you found this video informative, but with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.